Today's video, we're going to be covering the topic of grounding straps. Now this particular video is going to be covering the topic of grounding a small block Chevy to an S10, but it should give you an idea of grounding your motor, frame, body to other vehicles as well. And I'm going to show you the parts that I'm going to be using, where we're going to put the grounds, and some ideas for later. Let's get started. Okay, so for grounding straps, the ones I'm using are from American Auto Wire. I got these from Summit Racing. These are a foot long, 12 inches, considered medium duty, and they have a 3/8 bolt hole on each side. And as of now, aside from grounding the battery, I will be putting 3 ground straps on this truck. Here is what the strap looks like. 3/8 bolt hole on that end, and it's coated in something. I don't remember what it is, but I think it's supposed to help with corrosion resistance. I don't think I'll have any problem with that. This motor probably won't even be in this truck long enough, but if you're planning to run it for a long time, I think if you get a coated one, it should help prevent any rust issues down the road. Here's the other end. And then full length, it's a foot long. So let's jump over here and we'll start finding some locations to ground these straps. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing first is the block to the frame. And as you can see, I've already ground a spot here using my flap disc on my grinder. And make sure it's nice clean metal. I'll coat the rest of it that I don't use once I put the ground strap on. And then over here, I'm going to be using a bolt that goes beside the timing cover, which I have another ground on already, to ground it to the block. So I'm going to put that on, and then we'll take a look at it before we jump to the next step. Okay, so I put my ground strap on, as you can see here in front of you. This is the 12-inch version, like I mentioned earlier. All of 3 that I'm going to be using today are 12-inch versions. They make different sizes. You may want to use a different size on your vehicle, depending on where your mounting locations are going to be. But as you can see, I'll touch up the frame where I'm not grounding it to. Nice clean metal underneath, so it makes a good connection. And then also behind this bolt is a paint removed spot straight into the cast iron. So that's going to be our block to the frame. Next, we're going to be looking for a spot that we can go from the block or cylinder heads or transmission and mount it to the cab. So let's look for a location and we'll be right back. Okay, so for our motor to the cab, what I did was I ran a bolt that goes to the heater box that goes into the firewall and cleaned off the paint behind that nut there and used that stud to mount the one end of the grounding strap, and then the other part that goes to the engine block, or cylinder head should I say, I ended up using a 3/8 bolt that screws perfectly into the accessory hole in the back of the head there. It's a perfect spot. As you see, I have the trans dipstick on that stud as well close to the stud there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that just yet, but the cylinder heads, for instance, should have all 3 holes like that on both ends if you have these particular Vortec heads. Some of the aluminum heads I don't think have them, but if you have cast iron heads, you'll have these accessory holes you see there, and that's what I did for that one. Now the next one, what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to mount it to the cab and the frame at the same time. So that's going to be our next spot. And the spot that I picked out is actually going to be in a different location than the passenger side this time. So I'm going to grab the stuff that I need for that, and we'll show you where we're going to put that one. Okay, so the last one, what we're going to be doing now is going to be frame to the cab. Or I guess you could do the bed. This is the 3 that I'm going to do, but it's not the last 3 grounds that I'll end up doing on this whole truck. Of course, we'll be grounding the battery, maybe some accessory grounds, like stuff like that. But we'll touch base on those when we get to those at a later point. I thought about coming back here first, and I started looking, and I was like, well, where could I mount that? I considered using like the lip here on the cab as a mounting spot, and then drilling a hole in the frame. Then I started thinking, I was like, well, I don't really want to have to drill a hole in the frame. So to avoid that, I started looking around again, and I believe the next spot to ground the cab to the frame that I'm going to be using is actually a mount, which I believe may have been for an inner fender as well. And that's going to be right back here. So it's going to be right here. on your cab. Now, that's going to use a place there, and we're also going to be using it on a spot right there, which I have, which is actually going to be like a brake line hold down. So I'm going to go ahead and grab what I need for that, and we'll see how it fits up there, make sure it's out of the way and not touching those headers, and then we'll get that put on. So we'll be right back. Okay, so we got our cab to frame mount, and as I mentioned, I'm going to use this inner fender mount here in the back, and then we're also going to use, I went ahead and put it in there, but I'm not going to put it on just yet, just because I don't know exactly where I need to route the front brake line yet. And I'm going to wait till I do that before I tighten this up. I may need to move this slightly anyway, closer to the firewall, and just loosen the nut and slide it back. But this at least gives you an idea of what I was talking about. It's a perfect location, it's out of the way, and once I have that front brake line ran, I'll be able to put it in its spot that it'll be when the truck's ready to drive. So that's going to be our final location for today, and I don't think that I did a bad job at all. Of course, there are other places that you could have mounted that. For instance, like we did, the last one we just touched base on over here, we're out to the stud. But that cable for 12 inches, you could have put a bolt in the back of this cylinder head and ran it up to this, which actually looks like it was the grounding location originally as well. So that's going to be the final location, as I just mentioned. So let's do a quick recap before we wrap this video up, and we'll touch base on anything else I can think of. Okay, so that wraps up our grounding series for this engine, and now we have all the grounds for the motor, cab, and frame attached. Of course, like I mentioned, there are going to be several places that we do need to ground other things, such as accessories and so forth later on. We'll touch base on those, of course, in other videos possibly. And then to do a quick recap of what we did, the first one we did was the ground strap running from the frame to the engine block. And that was an easy one. There's plenty of playroom there just in case the motor torques a little bit. Then we have the back of the cylinder head, and we routed that to a stud on the heater box that goes into the firewall, so that grounds the block to the cab. And then lastly, what we did is we took a ground strap from the inner fender mount that was still on the truck, and we used that hole there after we cleaned the paint off of it, and routed that to a spot on the frame where we have a brake line hold down. Now that's going to cover the three there. As I mentioned, there are other places like here, there's some over there. There's different places you can do this. This is just what I did. You don't have to do it this way, but it gives you an idea of things to look for that you could mount it. As long as you have a good clean surface to mount it to, you shouldn't have any problems. That's going to wrap up the video for tonight. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Helps the channel. We're growing every day. I hope to intend to drive this soon one day, and we have a lot left to do. Some of the next video, just to give you an idea of what we're going to be working on next, we're going to be moving further back into the cab and potentially pulling the dash. We're going to finish the trans-cooler hoses. I need to fix the toe of this wheel and stuff like that. We have a lot more content coming. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.